Welcome to Third Eyesight. I'm your host, Juan Francisco, and I'm a spiritual intuitive who practices tarot card reading and mediumship. I've always been super curious about the supernatural and paranormal, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories. Let's get to it. I'm joined today by Brandon Mosley. Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's almost Friday. Can't complain.
Yes, we're recording this on a Thursday, and I really need the weekend to come. And this will go out on a Monday, and I'm sure people on Monday will feel the same way. Thank you for joining the podcast. Let's start out by a question I like to ask folks when they come on. What is your passion and your life's work?
That's a great question. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I'm so glad we connected, and I feel like we have a lot of great things to talk about. As far as my passion and life's work, my God. As a career, I'm a UX designer. UX stands for user experience, which is basically a practice of designing meaningful and relevant digital experiences to and for end users. But UX can also apply to physical objects too. Like, for example, one of the most poorly designed objects in the world are doors. They're not always intuitive, right? Sometimes you pull on them when you're really supposed to push and they're not labeled appropriately. Like, that's all UX design, essentially. My passion, I have a lot of passions. I would say I am passionate about people's well-being, and one of the things that I've gotten involved in with the community is transportation, being a transportation advocate, particularly in the borough of Queens, in which I live. And I'm also passionate about energy and good vibes and design, all sorts of design, interior design, graphic design, as I mentioned, web design. Passionate about that. I'm passionate about, that is a good question.
It's great to be quite the Renaissance person, like just in all different directions. That's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of passions and things I'm interested in. I've been really passionate about ancestral research and really learning about where I come from and why. Why am I here? Who do I come from? What are the traditions passed down? And what is the meaning of what family is? Why, or what is the origin story of my ancestors?
And what kind of I'm also really into that, as we probably shared with each other before. Do you feel like researching your ancestry gives insights about yourself today? Like how does that contribute to how you live your life when you research your ancestry?
100%. So when I was a kid, my family always talked about, not always, but I heard about our Native American lineage, but there was no proof or no name associated to that. And once I did the research, there was a lot more to discover. So, for example, maybe family patterns or secrets that were swept under the carpet that weren't uncovered until I did the research. Also, sharing the research helped bring the family together. And what I learned about my family, and this is more so my mom's side of the family, is that because of the racial tensions in this country, especially during the South, especially at the turn of the century, late 1800s into the 1900s, I learned that I owe it to myself to do better and to not take no for an answer, and to just do right by my ancestors. They had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations, and they were also very nimble and crafty in a way where they started their own businesses, and it would be a shame for me to not carry on that legacy and also try to just give back to the world. I guess in a sense it made me more empathetic in a way, and it made me realize that I have a bright future and I'm worth fighting for to reach my goals.
100%. And that is such a powerful insight to have. And a reason that I started following your work, and we'll get into this later in the episode, is your work on the Gay Body Guide, which is certainly a way that you are exhibiting the empathy you have, and also your care for your own community and the community at large. And so I'm very excited to get into that. in later in the episode. I want to ask you what is your personal relationship to the topic of spirituality or your own belief system in that regard?
Yeah, when you ask me this question, it really makes me think about that spiritual journey. I was raised in a Protestant Christian church that was very traditional. And looking back, I would say it was fairly strict. I mean, it was by the Bible. A lot of older folks were part of the church. And the church that my parents were members of has a lot of history. So actually, my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, were the first Black members of that church.
Wow.
And after a certain period of time, that church just didn't necessarily serve my family's needs. So we found a Lutheran church that happened to be much closer to where my parents then lived at the time. And that church, it was great. It was more about community and giving back, and it was more inclusive as well. I really enjoyed my time there. I mean, it was like a complete 180. But I think at that point, my family and I in particular just weren't as religious. We still celebrate Christmas and we still have some foundational beliefs there, more so my parents than me. I've kind of become more agnostic in that I am a believer in science, and it's probably part of the nature of the work that I do. I like to have evidence, but at the same time, I believe in energies and I practice certain things that are on the more spiritual, supernatural journey. So, like, I have incense burning right now, and I believe that if there's something off or somebody's going through a hard time, I believe in smudging and feng shui. I practice a little feng shui. So, basic things, I'm not like heavy into it, but, don't put objects in front of windows and make sure that the energy in the air in your space can flow. I believe in bringing the outdoors in and using natural elements to furnish your space or my space. So I love bringing in wood and having plants around, and I have a lot of tchotchkes I've collected over the years that have, I guess in a way, spiritual meaning, but also just some kind of symbolism to me. So maybe it's a terracotta soldier that my great aunt got in China in the 40s or 50s, or my birthstone. Maybe it is a wood bowl that I have some stones in that I collected when I was on a nature walk. So I do believe in curating certain things that have a positive energy, will bring positive vibrations throughout my space.
Right. And your upbringing, I myself, I went to, although being raised Catholic, I went to a Protestant Christian high school. And I could tell the difference between my Catholic upbringing and being in that high school and what I was taught. Um, so I'm curious from your end, what was it like to it sounds like you transitioned from being brought up in that faith, and now you more formulate your own belief system or your own the way you interact with the topic of spirituality. What was that transition like, or that journey like between those two phases?
Good question. So, when I was a kid, the first church that we went to, I hated it. Hated it, hated it, hated it. It just felt like a chore to me. We got dressed up to go.
I don't miss that.
I don't miss that. I hated the singing and the standing up and sitting down. I did love when they accidentally would give me real wine instead of grape juice when there was communion. That part was fun, but I just I just wasn't with it. I just felt like the old ladies that went to the church were mean. And then once we went to the Lutheran church, I was probably about 12 or 13. I think because it was more inclusive and there were other kids my age, and I had never done or been involved with a youth group before. So being able to connect with other kids who were outside of the school district that I went to was great. And we had things like lock ins and community service nights. We would go down to a soup kitchen at like midnight and serve the homeless for a couple of hours. that to me felt more interactive. It was more walking the talk, and I connected with that more. As far as kind of transitioning into my own spirituality, it pretty much started when the pastor of that Lutheran church ended up moving to the other side of the country, and we just stopped going to church. But there's still magic in celebrating Christmas and kind of getting ready for the holidays and whatnot. I mean, I'm not going to lie, do I still ask God to help me sometimes? Sure, but I'm not saying I don't believe. I'm just more. I just don't know if there's a higher power. I don't know. I'll know when I know, but that's kind of where I'm at with the agnostic piece. But as far as the spirituality, I appreciate different cultures that are out there and what they believe in, and I'll, as I mentioned, feng shui, which comes from parts of Asia. There's aspects of that that I really appreciate. It's probably, partially spiritual, but also a matter of the psyche. So managing your space and arranging your furniture and your decor in a way that emotes or evokes a certain emotion or positive vibe. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. I don't know how I got into smudging and energy bells. When I moved into the apartment that I'm in now, I somehow acquired an energy bell, probably just from visiting different types of shops. One's from Japan and more Tibetan shops and Native American shops, and learning about some of the traditions from those cultures and just being interested in it, wanting something to believe in, something positive and light. And if I move into a space or if something's off, I'll ring a bell in the corners to get rid of the evil spirit. So there is part of me that definitely believes and partakes in spirituality.
Well, something that I appreciate you saying or noting when you mention the different things you enjoy is noting that they come from other cultures, and that's something that I try to make a habit of. And I think is important on my end as someone who is involved in a lot of those kinds of practices. Like I smudge white sage, and I've said it before on lives or in my podcast before that I share where I get my white sage from, which is from a Native American outpost. I used to never do that, but over the years, I've learned that there's a lot of people who will mention cultural practices but not pay homage to where it originally comes from. And it's so interesting when you learn where something comes from,
Yeah.
and then you take from it what resonates with you. And I've done that too. I've moved into new places. The last apartment I had, I felt really off the first night, my very first night there, and I saged, and it just like maybe it was my subconscious, maybe it's like a placebo effect, but it worked. This is coming from someone like myself who believes in haunted places. Like maybe it was a placebo effect. I don't know, but it just made me feel way better when I smelled the sage and I went around with it. So I totally get it.
100%. And we're human. We're highly emotional creatures, and we need to do what we need to do to feel better and to kind of reset our minds or level set our equilibrium, essentially. I was going to mention, when you mentioned sage, I love Palo Santo.
Yep, I have some here
That,
too.
oh, I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it awakens the ancestral spirits or something. I don't know, but it just kind of just resets my mind and just helps to quiet the noise.
It's interesting you say that. I haven't read a lot into Palo Santo. I have it next to my white sage, and I use the white sage more, but someone told me that white sage is great for the intention of bringing positive vibes in. Palo
Mm.
Santo is great for clearing a room or a space of all vibes, like to start from like square one, so to speak. So there's something to that, and it sounds like that's what you intuitively feel when you've used Palo Santo. So
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many different things out there, and we've got to mention sound too. Sound is hugely important. I mentioned the energy bell, but there's also, I have a singing bowl. I picked that right up. A lot of people don't know how to actually sustain the sound, but I'm pretty good, I gotta say.
it took me a while. I think I've got my first singing bowl. It's a medium, small to medium sized one, and it took me a while to figure it out. I was embarrassed for myself in the comfort of my own room by myself here, but yeah, it's a lovely calming sound. I actually sometimes listen to sound bowl audio on
Mm,
Spotify or wherever I'm listening to something just to go. I can use it to go to sleep. I can use it to concentrate on a task I'm doing. Yeah, there's just something so calming about using different sounds and frequencies, and there's something called binaural beats, I think it's pronounced, you can use to go
okay.
to sleep. I love that kind of stuff. I haven't done it in a while, but there were nights where I would have trouble sleeping, and just playing some of those it's perfect.
Have you ever listened to Tuvan throat singing?
Tooth and throat.
Tuvin,
Tooth.
Tuvin.
You can tell I have not.
Okay. It is this, it is the most bizarre sound, but you've definitely heard it
It's like
before.
guttural kind of singing.
It's all in the throat. It is a sustained sound that is used for meditation and that sort of thing. It sounds mechanical almost, but if I am really stressed and having a hard time coming off of anxiety, because I also suffer from that, I'll listen to that. And again, it just seems to like awaken something where it's like, and it's great for meditation. It's so hard to describe. You have to just check it out. I mean,
How do you spell it? A T
Tuvan throat singing,
Tuvan throat. Okay, not tooth and throat,
not
people.
tooth and throat.
Tuvan throat. Got it. I
Yep.
think I know what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure I've seen it and heard it before.
You have definitely heard
And
it
it's
before.
fascinating. I think I have heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool, and I love Himalayan music, Tibetan music. I mean, it's there's a couple of places in my neighborhood that sell CDs and stuff like that, and it's just such a nice, calming thing to put on if you're meditating or just trying to just practice cleansing your space, clearing your mind. I highly recommend it to anybody
I'll
out there.
definitely take you up on that tip and I'll look into it for sure. With all this talk about mystical practices or anything related to that, getting into the supernatural.
Uh-huh.
I remember you told me once that you've had a supernatural experience, or you know of family members who have. So would love to give you the mic on this topic and ask you, have you had a supernatural experience yourself, or know of someone close to you who has, and would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I do not consider myself to be clairvoyant or a medium or anyone with a talent to connect to the other side. I can sometimes sense energies. For example, going back a couple of months ago, I was in an antique store, and this antique store, it was big and it had different booths with vendors who were selling stuff. And there was one booth that was dark, poorly lit, and walked to go inside of it, and I just stopped dead in my tracks. The hairs on my arms stood up. I got chill bumps. Something told me not to go in there. So sometimes that'll happen. It's not often, like once every few years. But like I said, I don't consider myself to be have any heightened sense of that sort of stuff. But I do particularly remember a story when I was a kid. I must have been maybe 3 or 4 years old. My parents lived in a different house than or place than they do now. My mom worked late. She worked in retail, so she was due home probably within another hour or two. And it was just me and my dad. My brother wasn't born yet. And it was time for me to go to bed. So my dad took me to the room, and the way the apartment was laid out, I could see down a hall and into part of the living room. And on the left side of that hall was my parents' bedroom and the TV room. And I distinctly remember, as if it was yesterday, seeing a shadowy black figure walk across the hall. Only a split second, but it was in the shape of my mom, and I thought it was her. And I remember telling my dad, "Mom's home, Mom's home." And he said, "What? I didn't hear her come in." And I remember him going out into the hall and looking around, and he went into the bedroom, and she wasn't there. And he said, "Mom's not here. What are you talking about?" And I don't have much memory after that, but I distinctly remember seeing that shadowy figure. It was harmless. It didn't do anything. It didn't look at me. It just walked by
Huh.
several feet away. I mean, and, it wasn't like right next to us or anything. And in my room, speaking of energies and sensing things, there's a cedar closet in that room, dark wood. That closet always gave me bad vibes as a kid. I never liked going in there. It just felt like a black hole, almost like if you saw that movie Get Out, when
Mm-hmm.
the main character goes into the sunken place. It almost felt like that, like being very isolated. Toys were stored in there. Couldn't stand it.
Wow.
So that's probably the most extensive supernatural experience that I feel like I've had.
Those are biggies. Well, first of all, with the shadow that you saw, did you ever have any hint later on or any indication of who that might have been, like in terms of relatives or the history of the house, or to this day, there's still a mystery.
I couldn't even tell you. I do know that. So the house was multiple levels, maybe 3 or 4 levels, and the landlord lived on the bottom floor. Landlord owned the entire house, and there were maybe like 2 or 3 apartments on the second level, and my parents had the top level, which was kind of a loft. The house was an estate that belonged to a family who manufactured chemicals, so they were quite wealthy. I have a feeling the top floor, the apartment that we lived in, probably belonged or was inhabited by the servants, because I know they had a maid or two and a chef. So
Hmm.
maybe there was something there. I don't know why that figure took the shape of my mom, or I perceived it as looking like my mom. I don't know. I don't think that apartment would have experienced a lot of death at all, but who knows?
You never know. And where was this apartment? Where was this building located?
So I grew up in White Plains, New York, and the
Okay.
house specifically was based in the basically almost like the northwest side of White Plains, right by the train station.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. And then with the closet, was this the cedar? You said the cedar door or cedar closet.
Yep.
It was a walk-in closet.
Kinda, yeah. Yeah, it was
Okay.
enough to take a few steps in from what I remember.
Okay. I had another guest on recently, an author who she lived in a space where the closet was what she called a portal. Not saying that what you experienced was a portal, but that for her it was just like sort of like a literal like a figurative doorway to the other side that just like things were coming in constantly. I remember as a child also there were some things I just didn't want to get near. And I still to this day, I want to ask you first, do you feel like when you enter spaces like with the antique shop and that booth, does it happen often to you that you really feel the vibe of a room or a space like, nope, or maybe if I go in here, I just gotta be on guard a little bit? Do you get those intuitive gut feelings still?
Sure, I would say so. I mean, there's a lot of factors that can go into that. So if a space is poorly lit or poorly decorated, I'll feel uncomfortable. But yeah, sometimes there is a deeper energy there where it's like, something's off here. For
Right.
sure, for sure. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that booth was a situation of don't go in there, there's something bad here. So yeah, that definitely happens. So my at my job, we moved to a new space several months ago, and I wanted to make sure that we painted the walls nice colors and brought in some level of visuals that would evoke positive vibes, positive energy, positive thoughts. I'm really big on like certain aspects of feng shui, like not blocking windows. And there are some people out there who still use those freaking CFL bulbs that are super, super white in
Oh,
tone.
like bathroom color white. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh no, no, no.
cannot stand that. I'm a big advocate for just making sure you're putting light in the right areas.
Right.
I can give you a whole bunch of like tips and stuff like that, but
I'll have to use you as a resource because I could use some tips. I mean, I'm satisfied with how things are in my place. I want to decorate much more, but I'll definitely shoot you a note asking for
Yeah,
your for your
yeah,
insight. Yeah, no, it's true. The way a person or a group of people adorn their space says a lot about their own energy that they're working
that's
with
true.
in their own bodies. Because I mean,
Yep,
we are our space that we live and work in is an extension of who we are and how we. It's an expression of us, of ourselves, right?
100%.
So that makes total sense. And I personally believe we all have intuition. I mean, the feeling a vibe of a room when we enter, that's a very, from what I know, it's a very universal thing people experience. We just get a gut feeling. I believe that is our intuition. There may be other factors like you walk into a space and there's this really terrifying, I don't know. Like I've walked into some shops that seem lovely, but then I see a Ouija board. Now, Ouija boards to me, I don't want to judge them too harshly, but I get spooked by Ouija boards
Sure.
personally. That may change in years to come, but for now, I get spooked by them, and I'll go into a store and I'll see it. I'm like, oh, then my mood about the store changes. Now, that could be more of a brain thing going on, the way I'm thinking about something. But otherwise, if there's an otherwise I don't want to say normal, but a room that doesn't have any indication of anything dark. It could be a lovely looking room, but you walk in, you just feel like, okay,
Yeah,
there's something heavy here, or
yeah.
and then you learn that the person running the store, this beautiful store, has an attitude. Whatever. So
Yeah, or
you
somebody
never
died
know.
in the space, or
Yeah.
maybe there was like, I don't know, abuse happening in the space, or yeah, anything I can think throw a room's energy off.
Now, growing up in White Plains, I love White Plains. I love Westchester County. It's a beautiful. I find it really beautiful. I escape there once in a while on the Metro North train from New York City. I feel like when I hear about spooky places in New York State or around the New York City area, or like very deeply. I mean, New York City is very historical. There's a lot of history that's happened here, pretty much all over the northeast of the country, the whole country, but especially in New England. But there's something for me about Westchester County that's just different. I don't know if it's because Sleepy Hollow's not far from White Plains, or I don't know what it is. But growing up in White Plains, was there a lot of like urban legends? I think there's this idea I had growing up that around that area there were a lot of urban legends, or the cemeteries being old and stories about the cemeteries. Like what was it like growing up in Westchester County? I'm just really curious.
Well, so Westchester is an interesting place. I mean, for one thing, White Plains is I guess it's considered the lower Hudson Valley. So it's definitely different than going to Sleepy Hollow or some areas that are further up north. As far as there being any urban legends, not that I had ever heard of. There's been nothing crazy, that happened. I mean, White Plains was a land that was inhabited by Native Americans, and I'm sure those Native Americans were pushed out, and the land was taken over by colonizers who renamed the original name of White Plains, which was Coropis, which translated to White Plains. So when the Native Americans came to the area, they had never seen snow before, and the snow was on the ground, and that's why they called it Coropis or White
I
Plains.
didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, there are still some streets that have Native American names, but I can't say that there were any crazy urban legends. I don't know. I couldn't tell you when White Plains was necessarily founded. In fact, I just bought an antique map of White Plains that dates back to 1860, so it's clearly at least that old.
Yeah.
But I think all of those urban legends were more so up north, like in Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, and all the haunted houses and stuff like that.
That makes sense. And I probably have at least one. I know a couple people who live in Westchester County and will probably be upset that I put everyone in one big pot and just like, because obviously Sleepy Hollow is not that close to White Plains. Yeah, it's like it's not far in a car, but I don't know. There's just maybe it's just me in my head. But when I take the train up there, there's something different about it to me, and it's just lovely. It's a lovely thing. I always feel like the energy's so it's just wonderful up there. Do you still have family that live up in that area?
I do, yes, I do. So White Plains is basically becoming a mini New York City. It has undergone some serious development over the past, pretty much ever since I left high school, which is over 20 years ago now. Trump has built a couple of buildings there. There's like a total different downtown. When I was a kid, it was dead downtown. And my mom and my aunt, they grew up in White Plains, but my grandparents moved there in the mid 1940s, and it was your typical suburban area with a little cute downtown, like single screen movie theaters, little ice cream and pop shops everywhere. So it was very kind of, I guess you could say it was very small towny. And now it's got a great nightlife. It's got its own gigantic movie theater. There's like 1,000,001 different malls. It's definitely transformed.
Wow, I'll have to check it out. Last time I went was a couple years ago just to drive through, but didn't really check it out. So I have to check it out sometime. And I totally made us go off on a tangent. So those stories that you told about seeing the shadow at home in that hallway, and then between that and the cedar closet, these experiences that are really, I mean, they obviously made an impression on you to the point that you remember them vividly.
Yeah.
Have those had any influence on who you are today, or like how you, like when people tell stories like that to you, do you feel like you receive them differently than if you had not had those experiences yourself?
Probably. I'm sure it's made me more open to the supernatural. And I love, not that I watch it religiously, but I love I was going to say Tyler Perry.
Close.
Yeah. Tyler Henry's show on Netflix. I'll watch Long Island Medium every once in a while. I mean, I'm still partially skeptical about that, but I'm open to it. I I have a friend of mine who is, I believe, and he obviously believes that he's clairvoyant. So he has had much more sensitive encounters when I was with him. So every couple of years we would go to Atlantic City, and there was one year we went and stayed in a hotel. He was kind of telling me about sensing something on the drive there, and he felt something in the room. And he said that he has to tell the spirit to go away and not bother him. And then all of a sudden a bulb in a lamp that was off sparked, like popped.
Oh my gosh.
And we were like, what the actual hell?
Did you change rooms or did you sleep the night?
No, because he said that if he normally tells the spirit to go away, they listen. And I was freaked out. I mean, I'm black, and black people don't mess with that stuff, but I believed him. So there's been stuff like that. Like he has a stronger sensitivities than I do. So I'm definitely open to it. I never had a moment where I didn't believe him. I find it fascinating. I find it interesting. I'd be interested. Here's where I struggle. Like, I'm a very science and evidence-based person, but I would be thrilled to know for sure that people do have these abilities. I think that would be awesome. Just like those recent pictures that came out from the satellite that took
Right.
the pictures of all those galaxies. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
It blows your mind.
Yeah, now we have evidence. I mean, we had evidence, but not like this.
Right. Right. Well, I always feel that there should always be a healthy dose of skepticism, because the fact is there are a lot of scammers out there, a lot of people that have taken advantage and continue to take advantage of people, their emotional states. I see it all the time on Instagram. And it's interesting because with something like mediumship, what I've learned watching mediums and me practicing mediumship, where the evidence seems to lie is when a medium says something that they couldn't know about your family, or
Yep.
like how did you know about that keychain with the two
Yep.
red dice on them? And that my father left it to me, and like it's a weird little tchotchke. So that's where I think the evidence comes in. But at the same time, it's not tangible, so it is hard to explain it, and it's also hard to measure it. There is an organization called the Forever Family Foundation, I think, and they actually do study mediums,
Mm.
and like how evidential they are. And there's some certified mediums by their organization, but But I always feel like having a healthy dose of skepticism is really important, because if we don't, even for those who do that kind of work, if there isn't a healthy dose of skepticism, there's no improving on it and there's no
Yeah.
growth with it. I think it's really important.
And it's also very, I think it would be incredibly naive to think that the human mind only came from one mold. We have geniuses out there, right? That's proven. We have different types of mental capabilities. So why couldn't it extend to the spiritual world?
I have the personal belief that science will bring us closer to knowing what the higher power is. Now, it's a little controversial because usually science and spirituality do not go hand in hand in conversation. I
Sure.
personally believe that science is bringing us closer to knowing who we are, where we come from, which I think scientists that is the goal of science. A lot of scientists to figure that out.
Hmm.
And I think in with that goal in mind, I believe we will get to a point where we will somehow discover some element of higher power. But that's in my opinion. Obviously, not based on any scientific research I've seen, but that's just my opinion. But I feel like science is a crucial part of knowing who we are, where we come from.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what a lot of us want to know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the human nature is to be curious, right? So I think we've learned a lot over the past several years about our world and beyond. So why couldn't it continue? And I also have to say, I'm a huge horror movie fan. I love, the slashers, the supernatural ones. Like something draws me to that. So
We all
just
like to get spooked, I think. Most of us, I think.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
also, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but it's definitely fat. Like I loved Insidious.
Hmm.
I loved Paranormal Activity. The Conjuring, like all of those. I mean, granted, those are dark spirit movies, but something holds my attention about them for sure. Not that I ever want to encounter a negative spirit or poltergeist, don't get me wrong, but part of me is like, well, maybe there is something out there. Or, when we all die, do our energies go back into the earth and we just become part of the life force that is the earth?
Hmm. Yeah. And the way I also see it, if Copernicus was persecuted in his time for saying the Earth went around the sun, not the other way
Hmm.
around, and then we found out later that he was right and that everyone else was wrong, I mean, it just shows there could be so many things that are yet to discover, and to think
Yep,
that we have the technology right now to know everything there is to know and not be wrong about things would, I feel, would be really naive. So I feel like there's always something more to discover, to improve, or to expand on. And I don't know, that's what makes it all exciting.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, before we end our conversation, I really want to talk about the Gay Body Guide. So, could you tell us
Yes,
what is the Gay Body Guide and what inspired it?
yes. So, the Gay Body Guide is a softcover book that explains what GPTQ plus people use or say to describe their body types, their tribes, their kinks. So, if you're part of the gay community, for example, you may have heard of a bear or a twink. So, the guide, that's the official name of the book, is like a glossary of those terms. Now, what inspired it is a couple of things. So, number one, as I have become more comfortable coming out, especially at work, there were times when I would go out for happy hour with coworkers and they would start talking about dating and they would want to know what my experience was with dating. And I would explain to them about the pecking order we have. Like, there is the body type stuff and the kinks, and then there's the sexual preferences, and there's all of these things that you have to get through to really connect with somebody. And somebody had made the joke that there were so many different labels that they really needed a pocket guide to keep track of them all. So I was like, that's interesting. Maybe I could create something and put it out there to help educate the straight community. But the other thing at the time is that there were quite a few queer men walking around, like twinks, for example, growing out beards but calling themselves bears because they just wanted to fit in. And I was just like, something's amiss here. Like, you can't, as much as this project preaches be who you want to be, there's still a consensus of what these labels are and what they mean and what they look like and all that other stuff. But I was also getting tired of the divisiveness within the gay community. And I wanted to preserve the meaning and the definition of these different labels, but also find a way to level the playing field and challenge the status quo of gay body norms. So, for those of you who don't know, when there are certain body types that are celebrated in the queer community and certain body types that are made fun of or basically treated like second-rate citizens. And I wanted to do something that celebrated everyone on an equal playing field and just brought the culture more to the forefront in a positive, fun, lighthearted way. In doing this project, and I should mention the second half of the project, which is the social media campaign, which helps people, or at least strives to help people, feel good about themselves, liberate their bodies, find other people or labels or tribes that are like them, and strengthen the relationship that they have with themselves and each other. And what I've learned in doing this project is that there is a real need out there for this preserved history, if you will, but also for male body positivity. And social media is a very interesting place because it's curated, and people who have muscular, slimmer, built up, masculine, quote unquote, looking bodies tend to get celebrated a lot more than the rest of us who do not. And one thing I'll share that I learned is that the men with those bodies are just as insecure, if not more, than the rest of us. Some of them have told me just that. But it's important for us to change the inner thoughts we have in our head, because we all have our moments. I still have them too. We look in the mirror, you're too fat, you're not pretty enough, you're not handsome enough, you're not skinny enough. We beat ourselves up. And there's nothing really out there to give us the tools to reverse that or to quiet that negative voice. So that is a long-winded response to what this project is and what it does.
That is why I followed you because I am very open. I've been open on this podcast a couple times and sometimes on my Instagram about my own struggle with body image or my relationship with my own body image as a human first, and then secondly as a gay man. This is reminding me there is this public figure that I really really admire, and she I don't know if you saw that ad that I think it was Burger King. This is not a sponsored ad. That Burger King, not that I have to say that I'm not that popular yet, but Burger King did this ad about like for Pride Month, if you want to have a burger with like two top buns or two bottom buns. Did you see that?
I did not see
It's
that.
kind of ridiculous. I didn't understand what the point was. Maybe it was like a tongue in cheek about sexual
Yeah.
preference. I don't know, but she posted it as like, oh, this is too funny, and oh, what gay man's gonna have carbs in Pride during Pride Month? And when I read that, and it's someone I really admire, I felt really uncomfortable when I read that, and I commented, my little self commented on this public figure's post and said, just like very lovingly and with like trying to be as kind as possible, gay men could eat carbs, and that's totally fine. That's all I said.
Yep.
She liked it, so I'm like, okay, this is cool, but also like, I mean, there's this stigma against within the gay community, the mainstream, I should be specific, the mainstream gay community,
Yes.
the commercialized part of the community. There's this commodification of the gym
Yep.
possibly steroid using body,
Yep.
and we see it on social media. And I do believe, I think that,
Masculine presenting.
yeah, and look, I think that the straight community, straight men experience that too. They see Thor, they see Superman, but at least from I can speak for myself as a gay man. In my experience, I do feel like for me it hits differently than it would if I were a straight man, because I am a man who is interested in other men. And it's like I'm comparing myself to the men I'm dating. I'm comparing them to myself, unfortunately. It's
Hmm.
just so it gets a little complicated. So it's a very interesting relationship we have of our bodies as queer people. And I could speak as a gay man, but I know that even for something I've heard about recently is or learned more about is body image as it relates to the gender non-binary community and the
Yep.
transgender community. That's a whole other level of discussion about body image. The reason I followed you is because I resonated so much on a personal level with what you're doing and with tribes. Then that is for people who are not familiar, those different like a bear, a twink, those are considered tribes. And I think although we don't want to be our label, there is a comfort in knowing a label because you know there are others who are like you, like especially for the bear community that has long been a sense of as broad a sense of uh unity is the best word I can think of. Just like, oh, like I don't have the status quo, quote unquote, attractive male body. Here are other men who look the same, and there's a name to it, and I can find comfort in that.
100%.
Yeah, and what is the kind of feedback you've gotten from having the gay body guide and your social media campaign?
Yeah, great question. Well, I was originally afraid to put this project out. So the guide has undergone a few different editions because every couple of years there's like a new set of labels that come out, and I've expanded on it and just added to it. And it's self-published, so luckily I can just print as many copies as I want. So the feedback, it has been really interesting. I've had people from some of the categories or tribes who are normally marginalized or made fun of reach out and say, I didn't think you would ever recognize this category. It feels great to be seen and acknowledged and not made fun of. Some people have been a little bit intimidated to reach out or comment because they thought that the man behind the account would judge them. And I'm like, no, why would I do that? We're all greater parts of the GPTQ plus community, and no one is better or worse than the other. No one has more or less value than the next person. It's important for us to just be a little bit more open and embrace each other and detach ourselves from what you just described, that masculine, butch, muscular, tall, white aesthetic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it is incredibly myopic to think that we should all look, act, sound, dress, express ourselves in the same way, because that would get boring and we'd be complaining about that. I think it's important for us to find strength within ourselves, but also empower others to celebrate who we are and what we can bring to the table. I think we need to give ourselves permission to explore. And we're a multifaceted community, so why tear some of that down? Some of the other feedback I've gotten is that it's helped people change their inner monologue and they'll be more confident to take their shirt off, or they feel justified in not looking like that gay beauty standard. And just like you said, I just want to touch on that just regarding labels. Yes, some people will say, well, they're stereotypical and you're putting people in a box. But a majority of the people are like, my God, I didn't even know that there was a bunch of other people out there who like what I like or do what I do or look like how I look. And they're very appreciative, which is very humbling to me because I didn't realize the impact that this project would have and how meaningful it would be to people. But also, what I had envisioned originally is that people would get the book and it would be on their coffee table. And then when they have friends over, they'd be like, oh, what's this? And they'd have a great conversation about, oh my God, here's what the queer community is. I didn't know what a giraffe was. Or, oh my God, maybe I'm a bear. It's okay to be a daddy. Yes, I'm 65 and I have a certain vibe about me. It's okay. I'm still a part of this community and I'm still valid.
And major kudos to you and the self-empowerment you are letting people know that they can tap into. And that's what it's really all about. And to
Yeah.
sort of tie a nice bow on this conversation, I as as someone who works with psychic ability and intuitive work and mediumship, and as someone who struggles with body image issues, there's a lot of complicated irony there because here I talk a lot about spirituality and yet I am so rooted in my physicality and my body image. It's kind of an oxymoron, if that lack the lack of a better word. But what, at least in my spiritual practice, what I've learned is we are all energy. And when we die, we don't take the hot bodies with us. We don't take
That's right.
the wrinkled bodies with us. We just take our energy and our consciousness and the beauty of our essence. And the more I do my intuitive work, the more I'm learning to get comfortable with accepting that our bodies will change no matter how we try to tailor it or make it shiny, whatever we want to do, or eat certain things. I mean, there's a difference between being healthy and then becoming so obsessed with impressing other people.
Right, 100%. Well, I have to say, first of all, you are super adorable. The fact that you have, I look, I don't want to diminish, we all are entitled to how we feel, but you, from what I'm seeing, the boys would go crazy over you. So,
Well, see, I see a handsome man in front of me, and it just goes to
oh,
show that
stop.
we really are our worst enemies and critics when it comes to this. And you're right. You can talk to someone who seems to have. I mean, I hate to bring this. I mean, it's a sad thing to bring up, but how many times do we hear about a successful person who seems to have it all, whether it's money or looks, who harms himself and it becomes a news headline?
Yep,
It just goes to show that uh, our physical environments, what we make of them, or the money we have, really doesn't mean as much as the people we love, the people we keep close, and the things we do to enjoy our life. Because I mean, the way we look right now, you and I right now, it's gonna change in 10, 20 years, and I can do all the. I'm lifting my face, all the facelifts we want, but it doesn't change how happy we really are with the way our lives are going.
yeah, that's true.
But I mean, compliments should be taken and given as freely as we'd like. But I think it's healthy to have a balance of like, yes, that person is beautiful, and are they happy with themselves? Because
Hmm.
social media has really encouraged a lot of us to not even regard. They seem to have a perfect life in Italy, but we don't know,
Yep.
is their marriage okay? Is their kid getting good grades?
Are
Whatever,
they a good
whatever.
person?
Are they a good person? Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the beauty of social media is that we can talk about that in a space where it seems to not be talked about. Like people like yourself are entering the conversation and bringing
Trying.
it to light. Yeah, you are. You are. Like I said, that's the reason I followed you, and I think I followed you a year ago through the Gay Body Guide account, and here we are talking. This was a connection made by that commonality we had about that. So I mean, I'm only one person, but I'm sure there are other people, many other people who look at your account and feel the same way. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that we should all just bind together and give each other support.
Exactly. Now tell our listeners how they can find out more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so you can find the Gay Body Guide on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Grommer. I even created an account on Scruff just to see what comes out of
I
that.
love that. That's great.
Yeah. So it's at the Gay Body Guide. I'm most active on Instagram, but if you reach out to me or whatever, I can see everything. And you can get the book itself at thegaybodyguide.com. There is an ebook as well for a little less money if you want to save some dollars, but I'm going to give all of your listeners 20% off at checkout if they enter the promo code Third Eye Sight.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. I will make sure to put that in the show description. I'll also post it on my Instagram and social media as well, for sure.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, Brandon.
Likewise, thanks for having me on. Maybe we can go crystal shopping at some point.
Yes, and we live close by, so we'll definitely have to do a crystal shopping day.
Sounds good.